Chapter 9: Springs and Springiness. When you sit in a comfortable chair, you sink down, not too far, of course. Otherwise, you would be on the floor. You sit safely because your weight is held up by springs inside the chair or the sofa. It is the springs which make the chair go up and down gently when they are pressed. This is also true about a bed or a seat in a motor car. Both have springs which give support without being stiff. The springs in seats and beds are made of coils of wire. The wire is springy and bends when it is pressed. When the pressure is lifted, it springs back into position again. Anyone who sits on the springs of a seat pushes them down by his weight. But since the seat is springy, it pushes back. A very heavy person may push the springs almost to the bottom, but a light person puts less pressure on the springs and so sinks less far into the seat. Springs are usually made of steel. To make them springy, engineers heat the steel and then let it cool slowly. Normally, if steel is bent, it stays bent. But if it is treated in this way, it will spring back into shape when it is bent or twisted. Another material used for making springs is a mixture of the metals, copper and tin, with a little of a waxy substance, phosphorus, added. Springs are made in many shapes depending on the job they have. The springs in a chair are called conical springs because the steel is bent round and round in the shape of two cones. They are wide at the bottom, narrow in the middle, and wide again at the top. Motor cars and railway coaches have springs to carry the bodies of the vehicles smoothly. These are called suspension springs. In a watch or a clock, the spring is used to make the watch go. This spring has to be very small and take up as little space as possible. The steel is made long, flat and narrow like a piece of ribbon. It is then wound up into a coil. When you wind a watch, you turn the coiled steel spring so that it is all wound as tightly together as possible. Its springiness makes it try to uncoil and stretch out. When the watch is going, the coiled spring is slowly released, allowing the spring to uncoil. As it does this, it pushes the clockwork wheels round and drives the watch. When the coil is unwound, the watch stops and has to be rewound. If the spring breaks, the watch does not go anymore till a new spring is put in. Some weighing machines that shopkeepers use for weighing their goods work with a spring. If there is nothing on the weighing machine, the spring of the machine presses against a plate. When potatoes, for example, are placed on the weighing machine, the plate moves down and presses the coils of the springs together. If there are 10 kilos of potatoes, they will push the coils together twice as strongly as 5 kilos of potatoes will. The scales have a measure on them which moves with the spring and shows what weight has been put on the plate. In some scales, the pan hangs from the spring. This spring is stretched when things show how far it is stretched. This measure shows how heavy the thing is. Many other materials as well as steel coils possess springiness. Another springy material is rubber. If you bounce a ball on the ground, it will bounce back. Now we know the ground is not springy, so the bouncing must be due to the rubber. If you squash the ball under your foot, it goes in. But when you lift your foot, the ball jumps back into its round shape. Elastic bands are also made of rubber and will stretch out to hold something. They spring back to their ordinary size if you release them. Air also is springy. That is why it is used inside bicycle or car tires. The first bicycles had solid rubber tires, but in order to be strong enough to last a long time, they had to be very hard. They were not springy enough to give a comfortable ride, but now hollow rubber tires are fitted onto wheels. These are then filled full of air and the air acts like a soft cushion and smooths out the bumps in the road. A football is filled with air because this makes it light and springy. If it were made of solid rubber, it would be very heavy and hard to kick. Wood is another springy substance. It is not as springy as rubber, but some kinds of wood are springier than others. The very light balsa wood, which is used for model aeroplanes, is not very springy, but the wood used for rulers is. If you place one end of a ruler underneath a pile of books near the edge of a table and twangs the other end, the ruler will spring up and down. Some diving boards at swimming pools are made of springy wood. They are just like giant rulers with one end fixed and the other